I love the Fair Representation Act, and I think about it this way. We have been told to believe that our country is represented by those maps of huge swaths of red and blue. The Fair Representation Act exposes what those big blocks of color really are. They're rounding errors. They're rounding errors that obscure and prevent representation of the true complexity of America.
Our founding fathers wanted us to have a more reflective House, a more reflective Congress. Where we are right now and the way we draw our lines isn't necessarily what the founders wanted. There are a lot of issues with the founders, but one of the things that John Adams wanted to see was to see all the people be seen. And right now we don't have that. We have large swaths of the country that are left with no representation. There are many points of view in our country. There are many different types of opinions, and we should hear those opinions. These are views that aren't being heard, and what we'll see with the Fair Representation Act is more voices actually heard.
The extreme polarization, partisanship, and the failure to govern by Congress are because of flaws in our current system, our electoral system. So what Fair Representation Act would do is introduce 3 changes. 1, voters would be able to elect their representatives by using ranked choice voting. It would allow creation of multi-member districts with up to 5 members each, and it would organize independent redistricting commissions. What these 3 changes would do as a collective is to change the way we elect our representatives.
We don't need constitutional amendments to do it. It's within our reach. It's a recognizable way of voting that is used in a variety of places, sometimes in cities. Now the state of Maine has it. It's been used in other countries. So it all seemed very doable. And it seemed doable if we can just kind of gather popular will at the level of states in order to make it happen. But it's a really meaningful change in the incentive structures for politicians, and therefore should drive really significant change in the quality of our politics.
I think the Fair Representation Act is an incredible advance forward because right now our 2-party system is broken. That right now for any problem that we see, there's usually one party that's for it and one party that reflexively is against it. And major problems are just not being addressed. We need to shake up the system, and the Fair Representation Act and proportional representation is a key to solving those issues.
RepresentWomen supports institutional changes like the Fair Representation Act because it combines 2 things that data shows elect more women to office. And that's what our mission is, to advance women's representation and leadership in the United States. So the 2 key elements of the Fair Representation Act are multi-seat districts where more than one person gets elected in a geographic area, and ranked choice voting. And both those mechanisms are shown to elect about twice as many women. So put together, we're projecting that far more women will get elected to the U.S. House of Representatives.
The Fair Representation Act is a really important solution for gerrymandering. We have a serious problem in this country with toxic partisan gerrymandering. We've got a serious redistricting problem. But we also have a problem with districting itself. Whenever you have single-member winner-take-all districts, you are going to have polarized winners, and you're going to have a lot of people in states that simply do not have any representation at all. So if you take a state like Massachusetts or a state like Kansas, it is really, really hard to use an independent commission in either of those states to draw a district that a Republican can win in Massachusetts or that a Democrat can win in Kansas. Except we know that there are lots of Democrats in Kansas. There's a Democratic governor there. We know that there's lots of Republicans in Massachusetts. There's a Republican governor there. Except it's almost impossible to elect somebody to Congress in those states. It's a genuine aberration when it happens. If you have multi-member districts, if you use ranked choice voting, what you see is Republicans from all parts of the country, Democrats from all parts of the country. You open up our politics to independent and other third parties again, and when those people come to Washington, they are incentivized to govern together and act in a different way.
People often think of the words like one person, one vote, but where we should strive for is, yeah, one person, but one actually meaningful vote where the vote actually matters. too many people are left unrepresented in our country, and the Fair Representation Act would allow for broader strokes of our country to be represented.
Ranked choice voting is a game changer. It's gonna have huge impacts on how elections in America happen, how people campaign. We're gonna see new strategies we're gonna see people campaigning together in ways we've not seen in a century, since the last time ranked choice voting was used in any way in American elections. We're gonna see people campaigning and asking voters to, if they're not gonna rank me first, please, rank me second, rank me third, get me on your ballot somewhere. And I think we're gonna see some really interesting changes to how people campaign and how policy gets made.
So I think the Fair Representation Act could be transformative for our democracy by allowing more voices to be heard in our political system, especially through the use of multi-member districts. The Fair Representation Act is a way of killing many birds with one stone. It's a way to end partisan gerrymandering. It's a way to ensure that there's more competition in our political system outside both major parties. And I think it's a way of trying to deal with this large problem of political polarization that we see today. So the Fair Representation Act, I think, could be a giant step forward in trying to create a more functional and representative democracy.
The Fair Representation Act solves a lot of problems for us. Right now, every incentive in our political system drives candidates and lawmakers to the two extremes. They have no reason not to demonize each other. They have no reason not to call each other stupid and evil and try to win the news cycle every year. With ranked choice voting, all of a sudden you have an incentive to try to work with other members of a legislature. The Fair Representation Act combines ranked choice voting with multi-member districts, and you end up with more representative government. So if you're a Republican in New York City or you're a liberal in rural Texas, you end up with some representation in Congress, where today you don't have anything.
It's one of those decades when we step back as a people and look at our basic rules and systems and upgrade them. And that's something that we have consistently done in the United States in periodic moments. Like every 40, 50, 60 years, there's a point of realizing that we have to look to ways to make a more perfect union. And I think we've entered that era right now.
When I first heard about ranked choice voting, I thought it was an interesting idea, but I didn't think it would get much traction. And here we are a decade later with over 10 million voters across the country now poised to use this system. So to me, it is an idea whose time has come, and I think it will gain even more traction as people see the impact it can have in improving our political system.
What I really think is hopeful is that there are these opportunities to change, to remove the structural obstacles to women being able to participate in government and politics as we know it. And that's why this is so exciting. Ranked choice voting and the Fair Representation Act, because they provide the kinds of rules and systems that women need to have the same opportunities that men and boys do to participate in every level of government.
Ranked choice voting creates incentives for all of us to participate in our system. More choice means more voice.
I support ranked choice voting to save constitutional democracy.